and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Let's get started with a glimpse of today's highlights. The U.S. is looking to review and reform the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement as it believes there are just too many barriers to American businesses. We have been seeing some positive signs of growth in advanced economies and a number of emerging markets in the recent months. We sit down with an expert to talk about this. Starting off with some strong comments on trade from U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, who has wrapped up the Korea leg of his Asia tour. Addressing American and Korean business leaders in Seoul this morning, Pence said it's time to review and reform the two countries' free trade deal. Our Connie Kim has more.
The Trump administration is planning to review and reform the 5-year-old free trade agreement between South Korea and the U.S. That's according to U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, who was speaking at an event in Korea on Tuesday, hosted by the American Chamber of Commerce, his last stop in the country.
But despite the strong economic ties between the United States and South Korea, we have to be honest about where our trade relationship is falling short. Most concerning is the fact that the United States trade deficit with South Korea has more than doubled since KORUS came into effect.
During his campaign, Trump had threatened to pull out of the FTA with Korea, calling it a, quote, job-killing deal that doubled America's trade deficit with South Korea and destroyed nearly 100,000 American jobs, though the veracity of the figure has been disputed. In Seoul on Tuesday, Pence reiterated Trump's pledge to protect American jobs and put America first when it comes to trade.
And our businesses continue to face too many barriers to entry, which tilts the playing field against American workers and American growth. President Trump has made it clear that the United States will pursue an America First policy in trade and exchange.
In line with his campaign pledges, Trump signed an executive order formally withdrawing the U.S. from the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal soon after he took office and is seeking renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement. Connie Kim, Business Daily.
Following a more upbeat forecast from the Bank of Korea and the country's growth outlook for this year, the state-run Korea Development Institute has also raised its projections, citing improvements in exports. But it says there are still potential risks that could hurt growth down the line. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
The Korea Development Institute expects the local economy to grow 2.6% this year. That's up 0.2 percentage points from its previous forecast of 2.4% made in December last year. The state-run think tank attributed the upward revision to an improvement in exports, which comes on the back of a modest recovery in the global economy. Korea's exports have been on an upward trend since last November, putting an end to nearly 2 years of decline.
The world economy is showing signs of improvement, which in turn has boosted our exports and helped Korea's semiconductor industry. Construction investment has also been strong. Considering those factors, we raised the forecast, as it could stem the slump in spending.
But despite the upward revision, the institute emphasized that it doesn't mean the recovery momentum is strong, but rather the downside risks have eased to a certain extent, and there's less chance of the economy making a nosedive. In fact, the Korean economy still faces a number of obstacles going forward. There are concerns that increased U.S. trade protectionism could provide an unfavorable environment for Korea's export recovery. On top of that, geopolitical risks stemming from North Korea could take a toll on financial stability and negatively impact consumer sentiment and investment. For now, the institute says the new administration, which takes over in May, will have to focus on risk management and maintaining flexible fiscal policies in light of potential risks at home and abroad. It also says Korea needs to maintain an accommodative monetary policy as downside risks could weigh on growth down the line. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
In a report released today, the Bank of Korea affirmed that global trade conditions have improved, but that a full recovery is still a ways away. Korea's central bank projected global trade would expand by 3.1% this year, which was 0.9 percentage points higher than what it was last year. The figure is still much lower than the 8% growth logged in 2007, just before the global financial crisis. The bank credited the optimism to recovery in major economies, including the U.S., China, and Japan, as well as stabilizing oil and commodity prices. But it noted destabilizing factors remain. Among them was the Trump administration's America First policy, which could spread protectionist sentiments to other countries. It also noted that the closing technology gap between developed and emerging economies, which could lead to countries becoming more self-sufficient and less reliant on trade. The global economy has been stuck in a low growth trap for over 5 years, but now things may take a turn for the better. With several advanced economies showing stronger signs of growth, various global institutions have also been lifting their growth forecasts for this year. Take a look.
Has the global economy finally turned the corner? The OECD forecasts that domestic demand in the U.S. will strengthen over the next 2 years, with GDP growth projected to reach up to 2.4% this year and 2.8% in 2018. It also said that most other major advanced economies in Europe are also expected to see growth continue at a modest pace. As for China, it recorded better than expected first quarter growth of 6.9%, driven by infrastructure spending and demand for new property. Japan also chalked up 52 straight months of recovery as of last month, while the Bank of Korea upgraded its economic growth forecast for this year to 2.6%, 0.1 percentage point higher than its previous estimate in January. And now eyes are on whether this momentum will last and put the global economy back on its feet again.
And to tell us more about this, Professor Yang Jun-suk from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. So good to see you.
Happy to be here.
So I think it's fair for us to say that this optimism about a global economic recovery started from the United States. And because it has been enjoying quite a steady expansion along with decent GDP growth and also job figures. And it seems that this sentiment is actually spreading to other countries around the world.
Right. So if you actually look at the numbers, then U.S. numbers aren't bad. They're solidly growing, but then they're not very, very high either. But just because we've been stuck in this global slowdown for so long, just having some positive number by the largest economy in the world is not only giving an engine of growth to the real economy, but I think it's making people more optimistic as well. Now, I just want to emphasize that the U.S. Fed was very careful in keeping the rate low until they saw very solid signs of growth and continual signs of growth. So I think the fact that they kept the rate low until everything was sure that the momentum was there is playing a very important part in this current revival.
Now, China's first quarter growth for this year also beat expectations, coming in at 6.9%. So would you say the Chinese economy is en route to recovery?
We hope so. Chinese economy is much more important to Korean economy than, I'm sorry to say, U.S. nowadays.
Yeah.
Now, the goal for the Chinese economy for this year was, I believe, 6.5%. So this came in fairly higher than really expected.
Yes.
I think everybody's happy about that. It was led by growth in exports and construction. Now, there are some people who are afraid perhaps the Chinese growth is building on a bubble. The increased construction is mostly in housing, and a lot of financial institutions are pouring money into housing, but they're not sure if the demand for housing will be there after construction is finished. But given that, though, the 6.9 growth rate is a lot higher than what people expected, and it seems to signal that at least the Chinese believe that the future is somewhat more optimistic than they thought just a few months ago, since, well, they're constructing all these houses, so they must think at least that there is a demand.
Now, how about in Japan? I mean, what's the situation like there? Okay,
Japan, you cannot say that they're at a fast growth path, but they're at a better situation that they've been in quite a few years. The OECD chief has just mentioned that the average growth rate for post-Abenomics Japan is significantly higher than pre-Abenomics growth rate. But what's really amazing is that their employment has risen. The unemployment rate is only 2.8% in February.
Wow.
And what's even more important is that youth unemployment is very low at 4.3%. So basically what they're saying in Japan is that every young people or even older people who want jobs can get one.
Okay.
Now, wage isn't that great. Wage growth is sluggish, but still, since everybody has jobs, at least they can think about consuming more. So they're laying a foundation for future growth, which seems to be fairly solid. But we'll have to see whether that catches on because there's been so much disappointment about Japan in the past.
Now, there are still concerns over in Europe, where there are various uncertainties, including the French presidential elections as well as Brexit linger.
Okay, again, they seem to be on a slow growth path, but solid growth path. Countries like France and Germany, well, they seem to be more optimistic than they've had in the last couple of years. For Germany, their Purchasing Managers Index seems that they're very optimistic about purchasing this year. The United Kingdom growth, everybody expected a recession right after the Brexit vote, and when they announced that they will go into Brexit, put Article 50 into motion, we all expected some kind of recession right after that, but they seem to be avoiding those recessions, and they had a very large depreciation of the pound, which is helping them export quite a bit. And now that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for Britain because they're also hit with a very high inflation because of that depreciation.
Right.
But still, their problems are not as bad as everybody feared last year.
Now, coming back here to Korea, Korea has also been seeing better export figures and signaling perhaps the Korean economy could be on track to recovery as well. But then the problem here is that people are not really feeling that the economy is doing better. So what could be some of the biggest problems here?
Okay, well, we have export growth in the first quarter compared to first quarter last year. It's went up by 13%. So that's a very significant growth. But because the exports went down in the last couple of years, we've only reached the level of 2014, 2015. So so we're just recovering rather than growing further. And then these type of recoveries, because it's not accompanied by increases in domestic consumption or domestic investment, it's going to be very uneven. So that might even create some more problems as some people get on the recovery path and some people don't, which is probably why even though the economy may be recovering, we probably need a supplementary budget sometime this year, just to make sure perhaps that if the growth takes place, it takes place fairly evenly, and people who are outside the recovery industries also get some benefits from recovery if it takes place. The consumption has been better in January and February, but it's been disappointing in March. But we'll have to see whether people get more optimistic because of the increasing exports.
Now, so how long do you think this recovery momentum will last? And what are some of the factors that could reverse this trend?
Okay, well, there's still some mines in the path out there. I think the biggest mine out there is what President Trump's policies are going to be. He has promised tax cuts. He has promised infrastructure investment. If those do take place, then there's actually a chance that U.S. economy will overheat. Now, that will mean bad things for U.S. in the long run, but for now, it may contribute to the global recovery.
Okay.
But if those policies do not take place because the confusion in the U.S. Congress, or if President Trump goes on with his protectionist policies and that creates a cut in world trade, then the growth momentum may stop.
Okay.
And then the Chinese economy, well, a lot of people don't believe the Chinese statistical numbers. They think that the government massages those numbers. If the numbers turn out to be significantly false, then the growth momentum may die. And then we mentioned Italy and Greece. Those are all minefields out there that can cut this momentum, because it's actually a very fragile and fairly new momentum. And the only country that seems to be on a really solid growth path seems to be the United States.
All right, well, let's hope the rest of us catches on and that this momentum will last as long as it could. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Listed companies among Korea's top 10 business groups have shrunk in terms of their workforce size last year. According to electronic records from the Financial Supervisory Service, 87 listed companies had some 629,000 staff on their payrolls as of the end of 2016, which was 2.3% less than a year earlier. The biggest loss was seen in Hyundai Heavy Industries Group, which cut nearly 15% of its workforce due to a slowed global shipbuilding industry. The number of contract jobs dropped by nearly 5 times more than permanent jobs, sliding 8.9%. Korea's first internet-only bank, K-Bank, has attracted more than 200,000 users since it launched on April 3rd. K-Bank said in just 2 weeks, customers have deposited $203 million, while roughly $113 million has been lent out as of this morning. This pace of growth is faster than originally expected, with the bank already achieving 30 to 40% of the initial goal that it had set for this year. K-Bank, formed by a consortium of KT, Uribank, and 19 other companies, offers around-the-clock services with more favorable interest rates than brick-and-mortar banks. The month of May starts in less than 2 weeks, and this year, the start of that month could mean an 11-day holiday for some here in Korea. Our Eunice Kim explains.
An optional Labor Day holiday on the 1st and annual red days for Buddha's birthday and Children's Day. Take the 2nd and the 4th off and you get a 9-day holiday combined with weekends on either side. With an early presidential election on the 9th making that another national holiday, it also means a vacation could stretch up to 11 days. For these opportunities, many Koreans are looking forward to a golden holiday in May. In lockstep, the country's conglomerates have announced their off-day policies. LG Electronics is recommending its staff take the 2nd and 4th off, while LG Display is extending the off days to the following Monday. Samsung Group said it's letting its workers decide based on its flexible holiday policy implemented last year.
It's part of our cultural innovation push so our workers can plan their holidays ahead of time.
For others, it won't be optional. Employees of Hanwha Chemical, Hanwha Techwin, and Hyoseong Group will all take the first full week of May off.
We're taking the bridge days off together so people can feel recharged and focus better when they return.
There's the natural advantage of boosting morale for everyone.
Steelmaker POSCO will designate just Thursday as a recommended holiday. But as the steel mills cannot stop, workers will take shifts, as will those at Samsung and SK Hynix semiconductor factories. Hyundai and Kia Motors will run production lines at full while offering their workers 2 additional holidays. For other sectors, taking time off is simply not an option. Brands like Lotte and Shinsegae will brace for the high season, not only at their duty-free outlets, but also at hotels, resorts, and department stores.
We plan to give our employees a chance to choose their holidays after the holiday rush.
And while that's a roundup of some of Korea's biggest companies, for many working at SMEs or running their own business, the talk of a golden holiday is as elusive as the golden goose. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
If Korea's rental market in the past had mainly revolved around cars or big household appliances like water purifiers, now there's a much greater diversity in items that people are renting out. And our Lee Joo-young gives us a look at some popular services and why people are opting to share rather than buying their own.
This may be heaven for Lego lovers. Equipped with everything from Star Wars themed pieces to Marvel superheroes, Play is Korea's first Lego rental franchise in the nation that allows users to borrow an unlimited number of sets for just about $50 a month.
My kid loves Lego so much that we've been coming here 2 to 3 times a day ever since we found out about this place. All he thinks about is borrowing Lego. He disassembles the blocks as soon as he gets up in the morning and comes here again after school.
Welcoming about 50 customers a day on average, Play says while adults do make up a small portion of the customer base, the service is mostly popular with children.
If there's only one set, children can get tired of it, but here you can borrow different types each time you come in different difficulty levels. That's why we love coming.
Children usually want to get Lego every time a new series comes out, but it's financially burdensome for parents, so I think they're looking for rental stores that allow them to borrow a lot of products with less money than it would cost to actually buy one.
According to Korea Development Institute, Korea's rental market grew from about $2.6 billion in 2007 to roughly $22.7 billion in 2016. By the year 2020, it's set to reach $35.2 billion. Experts say the rising popularity of rental services is largely due to smaller living spaces as the number of 1 or 2 person households grow, as well as protracted low growth in the economy that's kept consumer purse strings tight.
It seems that people are trying to enjoy a greater variety to improve the quality of life and have more fun.
One example is businesses like Able Fine Art, which lends out art pieces. Mainly renting out oil paintings by local artists, the art company helps exchange and install paintings every 3 months after consultation with their clients.
I can easily swap out paintings without having to worry about them. And although it's usually quite difficult to change the home atmosphere, this is a very effective way of doing that.
The service, of course, comes with a fee that can be as small as $17 up to $130 a month, depending on the size of the artwork.
When it comes to individuals, our main customers are those in their 20s, 30s, and families who have their own homes. As for companies, since offices are surrounded by walls and can be quite stuffy, the service is used as a form of welfare for employees.
Some companies are focusing heavily on streamlining the rental process and giving users easier access. This is particularly noticeable with the nation's first online fashion streaming service, Project Ann, which launched late September and guarantees next-day delivery. At this warehouse, thousands of spring collections are meticulously organized by number and letter, so they're easy to find when shipping out to some 100,000 customers they have. Once the clothes are returned, they're carefully checked for damage. And after they're dry cleaned, they're packed up once again to be shipped out to the next person in line. Luxury bags that can go for hundreds of thousands of dollars are also lent out after being placed in protective bags to prevent scratches. Project Ann says it even plans to introduce an in-house dry cleaner this summer to handle orders more efficiently.
When it comes to clothes, trends change quickly as well as the weather, so a lot of times they're stashed away in closets or thrown out even though they've not been worn that much. We launched this business because consumers want to wear a greater variety of clothes. There's now demand for accessories and scarves, so we plan to focus on women first, and then expand into men's and children's clothes.
Experts say the reach of the sharing economy will expand further over time.
First of all, resources are limited, so we'll continue to ask the question how we can share these resources and economic values. Rental services are similar to a business ecosystem. Manufacturers will supply to rental firms, which will then profit off of consumers. It is a very good business ecosystem in the sense that producers, suppliers, and consumers can share and converge with each other.
Experts also add that in the future, prospective rental businesses will revolve around IoT devices like virtual or augmented reality equipment and smart devices that are becoming indispensable to daily life in the era of Industry 4.0. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.